Hey, welcome back to the Plantastic Events podcast with your host Jennifer, and I'm Will. And we have quite the interview today. It's amazing. It runs kind of long, so we're not gonna push you on the intro, but there was so much good information here. I'm so excited.
Yeah, so today we're talking with Ariel Heart, and she is with Anime Town Conventions as well as Patent Pending Supply Company. And she brings a lot of experience and time within the vendor community, as well as some insights from the event organizer side that I think will be very valuable. So let's jump right in.
I'm excited for it. Let's do it. Hey, everybody! Welcome back to the podcast. I'm Will. I'm here with Jen again. Say hi, Jen.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back.
And we're here with Ariel today. Really excited to have you on the show and excited to pick your brain about all of the knowledge you have about going to events and making good decisions and things like that. And can't wait to pick your brain on
Pick away. Pick away.
Yeah, so today we're going to talk more about how to plan for an event, how to look at an event, maybe some of the financials behind it. Ariel comes with a lot of experience in the vendor world as well as in the event organizer world. So I am piggybacking on what Will said. I'm so excited that you're here to talk to us because I cannot wait to hear what you have to say and the advice that you have to give to any new vendors that are out there that are listening, or even some more of the more I guess not structured in the more, I don't know what the word I'm trying to use, but anyway, the people that have been here a while, even to help them out too.
Looking for seasoned
Yes,
veteran.
seasoned.
I was thinking maybe seasoned, yeah.
Seasoned. Okay, so let's just jump in.
Perfect. Actually,
So,
you know Ariel better than I do. We're just meeting.
oh,
I just
okay.
do you have an elevator pitch about what you do and where people can find you when they are like, oh man, I want to know more.
Oh God. So I've been doing my actual business for about 10 years. Everyday Geek slash Patent Pending Supply Company. Just changed the name because I've kind of started to branch out into some other things. I do a lot of etched glassware. Recently kind of led into the laser world, doing a lot of laser stuff now. But I've also branched into patents, which hence the Patent Pending Supply Company. I'm doing because patent artwork is public domain for the most part in a lot of the pieces. Started really manipulating those and turning those submission artworks into wall art for people. But also about 4 years ago, we ventured into the world of convention promotion. Previously, in a very former life, I was a car show promoter. So one of my friends said, "Hey, you know the whole promotion slash production side of things. I know the hey, let's get talent side of things. Let's start doing shows." And we created Anime Town Conventions. So right now, I'm currently the floor manager slash wearer of all the hats for Anime Town. Whew, it's a this is going to be a multi-pronged answer, because there's a lot. And I look at some of my friends that have just started to get into this, and they're like, "Oh, I hear that's a good show." Okay, so what do you think is good about it? And they don't really know; they just know what they've heard. Um, when I first started this, and as I've gotten a little bit more seasoned, I've done it less and less, but I still do it. I look at the show and I say, okay, one, is that my target demographic? Um, and a lot of people, they know, oh well, I sell anime stuff, so every show has anime stuff. But is it the target for me? I don't have a lot of like anime, so for me, anime cons don't make a lot of sense to sell glassware at. And this is going to sound terrible, but that target demographic for an anime con is that 13 and up demo, versus my target demo is more of a 21 and up demo. Um, that under 21 demo doesn't usually have a place to put glassware, because they don't live alone. So that's the very first thing that I look at is, who do I sell to? Does that show even speak to them? That's first and foremost. I I have a very, select demo, but then I also look at what's the average income of that area. Does that area, if I'm going to a smaller event, let's say I'm gonna pick my brain and say Springfield, Missouri, because I think that's usually my example for this. Springfield, Missouri, let's say their average household income is, $38,000. Um, okay, fine. What's the cost of the event? Is the event, to get in, does it cost $90 for the weekend over a 3-day weekend? Okay, that's $90 plus. What about the celebrity cost? I always take that into consideration as well. How many celebrities do they have? Do they have 40 celebrities that average $60 per autograph? If they do, you got to think they're probably going to get 5 or 6 autographs because it's exciting. This is a big thing for a small town that draws a ton of that disposable income that they have because again, $34,000. That's going to have a big effect on the average spend that customer has. With that, I also look at the unemployment rate in the area. It's a big deal because if you have a 5% unemployment rate, but your average income is $70,000, that's a lot different than you've got a 1% employment rate at $45,000. There's more people that can spend 25 to 45 bucks versus that higher unemployment rate. I don't know. Does that make sense to you guys?
It does. Completely makes sense because I think that one thing that you're touching on that I don't think anybody ever thinks about is the unemployment rate. And that's so underrated, but it's so important to understand. For instance, even in the big cities, like when you go to Dallas, say, even though there is such a huge gap of wages and unemployment, how do you look at that type of area, especially when you have Dallas and Fort Worth and you have to combine them all and you're pulling from several different places? How do you vet that area?
So Dallas is a perfect example because I was literally just there. So we were there for Fan Expo Dallas, and th there are certain areas that are historically prone to lean a certain way as far as how they spend their money on the show floor. Um, in Texas, and honestly at a lot of the larger the super shows that you see now, the C2E2s, well, I shouldn't even say C2E2s because their guest lists aren't that big. The shows with the huge guest lists, FanX in Salt Lake, MegaCon in Orlando. Let's see. We can go with Dallas. We can go with a show like Fan Expo Chicago. Those type of shows drive a different kind of guest in. So they drive a guest that's looking more for that celebrity autograph experience. So you have to adjust and you're going to need to say, okay, well, how many people does this show draw? And does that draw, do I think that I can get blank amount of money per customer, to spend with me? It's tough because shows aren't very truthful with their numbers. You know, some shows, and I shouldn't say aren't very truthful, there's not a standardized way that shows report their numbers. Some shows report it as number of days sold. So you can only, you could have 5,000 people buy 3-day passes and, 2,000 people buy single day passes. And the show's going to report that they had 17,000 people come in versus a show that literally just promotes number of tickets sold. They're going to say, oh, we had 7,000 people, not 17,000 people, because I say it all the time and people laugh at me, but that customer that bought the 3-day pass, their wallet doesn't magically refresh at midnight. They have the same amount of money that they had when they started the day on Friday, but now they have much less. So their available spend is the same as it would have been if they bought a 1-day pass versus a 3.
That's a great point.
That's
Now, and I know you have seen a lot of these before, so you're going back to events that you're familiar with. Do you have any suggestions for people who are going to something that they have never seen or don't know anybody at? Are there any good tricks to sussing out that information and figuring out those good key points?
So let's talk established events first. There are great resources online that you can find. On Facebook, there's several groups. I'll write that Comic-Con group where you can talk to people that have done those events before, and you can kind of find out, hey, I sell this item. Does anybody know, if this item is at this show? Or, you can just find out people's overall opinions on it. We Are Vendors is another group that's typically for Comic-Con vendors. There are some vendors that do Ren fairs and other types of events there. Finding those type of groups, though, even if you're a flea market vendor, you can find those local groups and you can talk to the people that have vended there before. New events are tricky because you have to kind of use what I talked about before with the, does the area have an unemployment rate that's high? What's the average, average household income? And then you have to look and say, okay, what events are happening around the time that this is going on? Prime example, again, I went into a flea market. Actually, it wasn't even a flea market. It was a holiday market in Tampa, Florida, a couple years ago. And I honestly was just looking to fill my weekend because I didn't have anything going on. I was like, you know what? Let me find something to do. The event was advertised as a continuation of what they've done in the past. They sold it very much like, oh, this has happened before, and we've drawn this many thousand people at our events before. Come to find out, it was their events that were in other locations, not the location that I was going to in Tampa. So I was a little fooled there because I didn't do the correct research, but I also didn't look to see if there was anything happening that weekend. Come to find out, there was an event at the convention center downtown that was happening that weekend as well. That was an anime con, so it wouldn't have affected the typical person that was there, but it definitely affected me because it took my nerd base and put them there at that convention center. But also, there was another holiday fair that happened at that fairgrounds the weekend before. So the people that were going to hit a holiday fair had already hit a holiday fair. Researching those type of events that are happening around your event is key because, again, people's wallets don't just magically recharge. They need a little bit of time to recoup money. Even in the Comic-Con world, if I'm going to do an event and it kind of goes into my red flag area. If I'm going to do an event, or if I'm looking at an event, and that event is smack dab in the middle of a run of, let's say, 3 events in 4 months, I'm probably gonna cut that event out, especially if they're within like an hour of each other, because fandom people will drive to events, um, but they're going to be fatigued. They're going to be a little bit less willing to spend money on that, second and third event,
Yeah.
especially if that first and fourth event has a really good lineup of guests, vendors, cosplayers, and they're solid events.
So on that, because I have 2 questions. So the first question is, I know that some people like myself drive across the country to vend at different events, right? So for somebody that's new, how do you look at something out of the area? Do you use the same criteria, or is there another approach that you would do for something that's further away, or with the same approach? What do you think?
So when I'm looking at events that are further out, let's say now I live in Florida, versus when I lived in St. Louis, I'm looking at those events, and I'm looking at them differently because now I have an extra 16 hours of drive time. Um, what's going to be my cost? Especially from Florida. What's my potential income? What's realistic? A lot of people, they'll say, "Oh, well, I did, let's say, $8,000 at MegaCon, and this show is about the same size that I'm driving across the country to, but now I'm bringing double the product, so I should do $16,000." That's not how it works. You still have to look at that event as it's a similar size, it's a similar fan base. Now, yes, you're going to bring more product, but let's say you still only do $8,000. What are your costs going to be? Are you paying yourself for the extra drive time to Salt Lake? Orlando to Salt Lake, it's 34-ish hours drive time. Even if you're paying yourself $10 an hour one way, that's $340 one way, times 2, times 3 extra hotel nights both ways.
Mm-hmm.
So now you're at somewhere around $1,100 if you're being very budget conscious, just to get you there and pay yourself, not including your gas, not including the cost of the event, not including your expenses, just your product costs.
Yeah.
You're going to be looking at, okay, I did $8,000 at MegaCon, and I live in Orlando, and my profit after everything was $5,500, versus my profit to drive even further is going to be somewhere around $3,500. Is that actually worth it for me, or can I cut those costs somewhere else? You have to be realistic, because you're not going to do $16,000 at a show just because you're bringing twice the product. That's not the typical formula. You buy an extra booth, you should anticipate a 20% jump in your sales because you're able to put out that much more product. Doubling your sales is not it.
Yeah.
Did that answer your question?
Absolutely, it sure did. And I think
Okay.
that a lot of people, it's crazy to me when I talk to some of these people at these events to think like that. They're think, oh, well, I just came over here and I did so well at so-and-so show, and now I'm here and I've got even double. So it's going to be, people make that mistake a lot with WonderCon. And they think that just because they're going to WonderCon and they're with San Diego, that it's going to be busy. I mean, but I understand it too, because that one is a little of an outlier, because people like to get in that show to be able to get into San Diego, but there's other people that don't know to do that. So they drive across the country because it's across the street from Disney, and then they anticipate all of these sales coming in when it's just the same product, like kind of like the guy that was only selling the one item. It was like a Baby Yoda ninja thing that we were trying to talk to that guy. And he only had the one thing, trying to go into WonderCon for the first time and asking everybody, should I go? Should I go? Or like, you haven't even done a show yet, bro. So it's just like, knowing those numbers, I think is going to help a lot of people.
And, you know, I can speak to the WonderCon mistake. I have history in California. So I used that sales history to say, oh, you know what? They get a similar clientele as LA Comic Con. They get a similar customer or a similar attendee count because look, I love the guys at LA Comic Con, but they don't draw 90,000 people.
No.
It's not a 90,000 individual show. But I've always had great sales numbers there. And didn't think about it. One, I haven't built that community an hour south of south of LA.
Yeah.
But also my brain was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna be able to do great. Even though it's an election year, even though it's on Easter, even though it's going to rain all weekend, I made the mistake of, of thinking that it was just going to be an easy banger type show. And it definitely wasn't, but it's good experience. And like
Mm-hmm.
you said, it's one of those, hey, I knew going in that I wasn't going to blow the doors off. I wanted that exposure to the show floor manager for San Diego.
Yeah. So there's a method behind the madness with it, but the people that go in that don't have it, that's what concerns me. And I like to see at least the smaller makers and the crafters and all the people out there. I want to see them grow, especially if it's something different, because when you get a whole bunch of vendors with the pop vinyls and the stickers and all the same stuff, it's just like seeing new people come in makes me excited. But what are some red flags that you look at whenever you're looking for these events? Like, what are like some of the main red flags that you're like, nope, outside of what you've already talked about, is there any red flag that we should be looking for?
So, and I'm going to talk about both indoor and outdoor events now because I do both. I do a lot of outdoor events when there's nothing going on. Just because one, I like doing them, and two, it's a little bit different perspective. Indoor events, when I go and check social media, whenever I'm looking at an event that's either for the first time or to go back to an event that maybe I had crossed off the list once because it didn't perform well or what have you, and they've popped back up, into that mix of, hey, maybe I do this show. I look at their social media and I look at, what they're talking about, what kind of content their posts are. And then how many people are liking and sharing and commenting on those posts. Facebook, Instagram, do they have a TikTok? Because though those all three things, it helps you determine, if they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, or if they're even hitting the right people. Prime example of a red flag that has come up solely from social media. There's a con, and I will not name them, but they happen in Orlando, and they are a very Disney specific convention. They focus entirely on the guest experience. They have mentioned vendors outside of making posts for, hey, vendor applications are now open. They mentioned vendors, I think it's twice in the last 2 years.
Oh
That's
my
it.
God.
They don't do a walk of the show floor. They don't do a, hey, the show floor is open. Make sure to go check out, your vendors, what have you. There's literally zero talk about that. And for a show that is this focused, there should definitely be talk about it. And, last year I spoke to multiple vendors at the show because I vended there the year before. And I paid my booth fee well before I noticed that they were not talking about vendors. I talked to vendors this year and they said, yeah, this was a terrible show for us again. Everyone was so focused on the guest experience that we didn't have many people in the vendor hall, or in the vendor part of the hall. So, that kind of helps determine, if it's a red flag or not, if they're talking about vendors or if they're just getting interaction on those posts.
Go ahead.
Let's see what else. Other red flags, you know, outdoor events, whenever I'm looking at outdoor events, I look to see if there's a rain or shine on the event. If the event says, oh, if it rains, the event's canceled and we don't offer refunds, I won't do that event. If it's a rain or shine event, then I'm in because they're doing it regardless. And if it's a rain with a rain out date, again, I definitely am in for that because that means that promoter is there for it. I've seen a lot of events um, that don't offer refunds if the event's rained out, which is ridiculous. Um, on that same thought too, um, any small event that is first annual, it's not so much a red flag, it's just a caution. If you find it in some of these Facebook groups, Florida has a ton of these right now. They're scam events where they'll ask you to pay your admission fee, and it's through a Google Doc, application, and you don't know if it's a real event or not, and you just go and pay it. Guess what? It's a scam event. You didn't call the facility or anything. That's a red flag, which now I get to plug you guys. That's the beautiful thing about Eventney. Everybody's there, and all of those are real events that are happening. So if you find something on there, it's so nice that you don't have to worry so much about that. You just need to do the verification to make sure that it's the right event for you and that they've done the right things as far as the marketing goes.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a great point because us or any other platform, really, they've got skin in the game. And that's what you want is someone else who has also put their business on the line. So you feel more comfortable putting your business on the line because why not? Why, if they're not going to toe any of the line, that's questionable anyway, or they may just be ready to jump out of there and not do anything. I did want to ask, I was going to ask about green flags, but actually I'm more curious now. As a person who does indoor and outdoor events, do you have any tips for people on who maybe do one and don't do the other? Anything a way they should approach it differently, aside from the obvious, like the weather? Is there anything else that you would say to look at if you are switching from indoor to outdoor or vice versa?
So indoor and outdoor events are beasts unto themselves. Um, Indoor events, you have a very flexible way that you can set up your booth. You don't have to worry about weather. You don't have to worry about, lowering your tent at the end of the night if it's a multi-day event. You don't have to worry about, there's a lot of things that you don't have to worry about. In an outdoor event, you're basically within the constraints of your tent, because almost every outdoor event that I do requires that I bring a tent. Excuse me, that tent needs to have, weights on it. That tent sometimes has to have a certain color top, or the event won't let you vend there. I've started to see a lot of that, and I'm like, no, that's the individuality of the vendor. Come on now. But when let's say you're going from outdoor events to indoor events, you need to remember that one, you don't have an unlimited ceiling. You can't merchandise 8-10 feet tall. But you also, when you're at a Comic-Con or an indoor market, you have a little bit more of an ability to catch people's eye on the way around or on the way back around, because a lot of people shop those indoor areas more than they shop the outdoor areas. I don't typically, when I go to, there's a huge flea market in Florida that I go to about once every 3 months. I don't walk those aisles multiple times. When I'm in an indoor area, I do. So you have to have a catchy display that is not super busy, or if it is busy, it's designed to bring those people in very, very quickly. So the merchandising part of that really has to change. I can't do the same setup that I do for Comic Cons at a typical outdoor event.
That Makes a lot of sense. Those are a lot of good points. Now, the question I was going to get to, you spoke on some red flags about, if you see this, maybe that event, maybe you should do some more research and make sure. Are there any green flags? Are there any things that you've seen events do that you're like, man, now that's next level, or that really helps me out? Or it's something that people who sell at events should really take notice of if an event is put in the effort for?
There's a promoter, and I'm not going to name him, but he does a great job at community involvement and like that the ground level promotion of their events. He has a team that literally goes into every area that they have a show, and that team multiple times a year is just handing out flyers to locals, doing local events, making sure that everybody around town knows blank show is happening. They do a fantastic job at that. So when the promoter really does the grassroots efforts and doesn't rely on just Facebook advertising and going to the random Comic-Con that's 2 hours away to promote. That's a green flag when I see that promoter really getting that extra effort. Um, Other green flags are when promoters are socially conscious. There are a lot of causes. There's a lot of things going on in our world right now, and when a promoter takes a stand to make sure that their convention is both inclusive and safe for everyone, that's a big deal. And that includes not bringing in guests that are gonna create some division within that community. There are certain events that bring in problematic uh, problematic celebrities, and with that they bring a certain clientele, and that's a red flag. Obviously, the green flag is that promoter that's going to bring in the diverse, safe clientele.
Yeah, that makes sense completely. So what are some indicators on the outside that we can look at as vendors that indicate a well-organized event that maybe we wouldn't have known before, or somebody that's new, or maybe we just don't know? I don't know. What are some that you think?
So, it's tough to say, oh, hey, this is a well-organized event from the outside. Um, because let's be real honest, you don't know until you know. Um, I can say, oh, hey, look, this event was one of the most well-organized events that I have ever done. And that experience is a little different. Um,
Okay.
I think the generic indicators are, communication. Um, you know, does the promoter respond to questions in a timely manner? That's a big thing. Um, Ease of access to a website, and that it sounds silly, but how easy is it for me to purchase a booth? How easy is it for me to buy tickets? We looked at, you know, how easy is it for me to go on the Eventney website and buy a ticket to Anime Town? We made sure that was something that was easy for our guest, because we, at least on the front end, want to have that appearance of organization. Now, in reality, behind the scenes, it's a bunch of chickens and cats running around going crazy, but we know, at least we give the impression on the front end, because we know, hey, this is taken care of, this is taken care of, this is taken care of. We want to have that appearance at least. So it is tough to say, from the outside, what single items are going to be able to, be visible to people that don't know anything about the event. But talking to other vendors and saying, hey, look, what was load in like? Oh, well, we waited in line for 19 hours. Um, yeah, that's not an organized event. Oh yeah, load in. They told us, we were going to come in two groups, group A and group B. Group A was at the front of the hall. Group B was at the back. If you had to miss it, you had to miss it, and you could load in the next morning. That's a sign of organization for that group.
Yeah, that it's so true. Even with the larger events like New York Comic Con, that's a mess. Just trying to load in and load out. So I think it's still a great event for vendors, I think, but it's a mess, and you can just tell. But from when you drive up to when you leave, you're like, God, that was a shit show. But
yeah,
it's worth it sometimes.
New York is one of the it's a nightmare, but it's worth it. Because look, New York's a great show. They draw 200,000 people. And if you don't make money there, you might not have the right product.
Exactly.
That's kind of the thing. You might not have the right product for that area. I wanted to go back to something, if you're okay with me going back to the ROI question. There's always a question of what's a good show? Like, what constitutes good? I talked to a vendor this past weekend that I said, how was your show? Oh, it was great. We broke even. What? You had a great show and you broke even. What does that mean exactly? And they don't use the show for extra sales. They use shows, they pay for their booth, with the sales from their art, but they use that to generate online sales later on, leads for galleries, leads to get them, into different places. So a good show for people is completely different. I look and I say, okay, what are my total expenses? Are my expenses $3,500? Okay, for me, I'd like to, to triple that. So I'd like to do, let's say $10,000 is a round number, at this event, because my costs are $3,500. Am I driving? Okay, now I need to pay for my, my extra drive time. I live in Florida, so it takes me 6 hours to get anywhere. So that 6 hours is already off the table. So that's my generic, that's my base. Am I going to drive 36 hours? Okay. I definitely need to add the drive time in. Am I driving 12 hours? You know what? I'm not really going to say much about it, because I can leave on Thursday morning and get there Thursday night. Looking at, what you need to be profitable is really where you should say, is this a good show or not? You should always be profitable. You should always be striving to, to build that money in. But if your business has other goals, get the awareness out for your game, get the awareness out for your brand, and you break even, that's fine. But don't tell people it's a great show if you're just breaking even. Make sure to explain to them, hey, these are my metrics. These metrics might not be yours.
That totally makes sense. And when you said the break even thing, I thought, how can that possibly be good? But I know somebody who vended at expos, and if they got out of the expo series, it was hard to get back in. And the expo gave them the emails of everyone who bought a ticket. That's most of what he wanted, because it's a big ticket sales item. He could put them into the sales funnel, and that was enough. Like, that was breaking even for him, was just paying the money to get the email list. But that was that kind of product, and that's that kind of business. Whereas if you have a different business, that's not going to work for you. But yeah, every business is going to be different, especially considering the expense of your product and what involvement that is. What else? Let's see. Oh gosh.
We've talked about so much.
The wheels start spinning. It's like, oh, I had a bookmark and like 5 ideas, and now I can't think of any of them.
So I have a question. So there is some folks that like to delve into wholesale shows. Have you ever done that?
I have. Wholesale shows are a completely different beast, because at most wholesale shows, there are 2 different categories that you can fit into. You can fit into the wholesale order writing end of the show, or you can fit into the cash and carry end of the show. Um, I have only done the order writing end, and this was amazingly during COVID.
Interesting.
I did 2 shows in the South. One of them was in Dallas, and one of them was in Biloxi, Mississippi. The show in Biloxi, Mississippi was fantastic. It was the first time I'd ever done order writing. And I could not because, look, there could be licensing issues on some of the items that I do sell. They're fan created, but I'm not going to sell my Build an Ewok Workshop cup as, as a wholesale item, because even though it's parody, I'm not going to be that person. It's protected by parody law, but um, I had to create an entirely new line of glassware that was, dad jokes. It was quotes. It was, snarky wine glass sayings. We did lots of like generic, you'd find it at Hobby Lobby or a home decor store lantern designs, because I do lanterns as well. Um, I created this whole line of that product, and I had to create a catalog, and I had to have order sheets, and I had to create a new setup based specifically around the wholesale end of it, because I couldn't use um my normal booth setup for that because it just didn't make sense. And it didn't come across as a crisp wholesale display. So the display was completely different. Joe and Biloxi, fantastic. I wrote a ton of orders. 2 days. It was a 2. The show in Dallas cost 5 times the amount as the Biloxi show. 4 days long, much longer drive from St. Louis at the time. I wrote 0 orders over those 4 days. Now, did I have orders come in later? Yes, but 0 orders over 4 days. I would have done much better doing cash and carry at that show than I would have done with order writing. So you have to look at those type of markets and say, hey, look, this is a Biloxi show and it's a small show. Who's attending? Mom and pop boutiques, gas stations, individually owned gas stations, souvenir shops, places like that. Versus the Dallas show, I had Buc-ee's, I had Nordstrom, I had MGM Resorts, I had all of these large corporations that are looking for something cool. And while I had something cool, they also wanted it very cheaply mass produced, versus the other show was more apt to buy that handmade item.
Interesting.
I know, right?
That's kind of crazy to me. But I mean, I guess, I don't know. I guess for larger companies, they do tend to go as cheap as possible. It kind of shows in what we purchase on a daily basis. But at the same time, for small business owners like you and myself, it's just like there's no way for us to make it in wholesale. I don't think that's just not it.
There is, but we have to make sure that it's a very specific single item that can be created very easily, very quickly at a low cost, because that's always what they want.
Yeah, I think if you want to be creative, that puts a real pinch on that, because you can't, like what you said, and a lot of people don't get into this, especially I think a lot of our artists and vendors on Eventany aren't there to make the next big business. They just love what they do, and they want to share that a bit. They want to succeed also, but it's hard to mass produce 100 different things.
Yeah. So I don't want to, we've been going for almost an hour, so I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but I am going to ask you, has there ever been an event that it passed all the signs and no red flags, green flags everywhere, but you decided that maybe it wasn't the right fit for you after the initial interest? And what changed your mind?
I've had a couple of events where I've been like, oh, you know what? I think this is going to be a great event. And I'll see something on social media, that makes me question it. Um, or, one of my friends that, oh yeah, I forgot about that event. But I've never really had like something that I had to put on the brakes full stop for. Um, because typically I go with my gut. If my gut's telling me all these signs are there, let's do it. Now, have I been wrong? So many times. I've had events that I've said, "Oh, this should be fantastic," and it's not. That happened actually earlier this year at an event that I was at. I was like, "Oh, the advertising's here. They've got great response on all their Facebook posts. Their Instagram is on fire." I'm seeing people on TikTok that, have reposted this stupid ad that they made. Um, you know, there's there's that interest, let's go. And yeah, the people just didn't show up to buy. They did the right thing and got people in the door, but people just were not there buying. So, I've been wrong in that sense, but I've never had something where I've put on the brakes after it's passed all of my sniff tests, basically.
Okay.
People attend for different reasons. So I guess there's some things you just find out when you get there.
No, absolutely. And sometimes, you'll look at an event and you're like, "Oh, this should have my demographic," for me that little bit older demographic, "Oh, they've got all these 80s and 90s stars. That should be my crowd right there." But that crowd doesn't show, or, only part of that crowd shows and they spend all the time waiting in the lines. Sometimes that happens.
So before, I don't know. I just have so many questions still, and I feel like I'm too excited for this interview, but that's okay. But
Girl, you can ask them all. I have all the time.
sorry. So what's the most like memorable interaction that you've ever had in an event?
Um, I'm gonna have to give a couple answers.
Okay.
Because the first answer is when I was a cosplayer. This was one of the coolest things that ever happened. And it plays into my most memorable experience at an event. Um, I'm at Calgary Expo with a couple people that I know from the cosplay world. We were guests up there, and Calgary does this really cool thing where they put all of their guests, whether they're artists, art guests, whether they're cosplay guests, they're celebrities, whatever kind of guests they bring in, they put you on the back of a car, like on the back of a convertible, and they parade you around downtown. Um, it's the most ridiculous and awesome thing, and it's really cold because it's Calgary in April.
Okay.
So you have to make sure that you're dressed for the occasion. I was not, so it was cold. But they parade you around downtown, and then they take you to the convention center, and you start your day. But before that, they have a media junket, and it's basically everybody does, all these media outlets come in and they do interviews with everybody. They find you and they do the interviews, but there's a breakfast beforehand. And we're sitting there at a table because we didn't know anybody else. There's, Brandon Routh is there. Joey Fatone is there. There's all of these celebrities that are hanging out, and we're cosplayers. We're just sitting at the table like, okay, Phil Lamar is like two tables over, and we're eating our breakfast, and this kid walks up and he goes, "Hey, I noticed you guys have an empty spot at your table. Is anybody coming to eat breakfast with you guys?" And we're like, "Oh no, it's just us." And he's like, "Okay, would you mind if my client came over and you know sat at this table? He's in a scooter. He needs some extra space, and if all the tables are taken up." And we're like, "Yeah, absolutely. That's not a big deal at all. Whatever." We're like, whoever, just child has, has whatever client, fine. We didn't think anything of it. This kid looked like he was like 17, 18 years old.
Oh, wow.
So fast forward like 5 minutes, we see the kid bring over a tray, and right behind him is Peter Mayhew, Chewbacca.
Oh,
And all
R.I.P.
of
Peter
us,
Mayhew.
I know, all of us at the table are Star Wars fans. So we're just like, what?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. And Peter was so great. We didn't say anything because I think we were all starstruck. And without missing a beat, he's eating, and he said, it's going to be very awkward if you guys don't start talking. And it was fantastic. Like, I will remember that and what comes next. So we chatted, we talked about Star Wars stuff, we talked about non-Star Wars stuff. We found out that he lost a ton of weight during A New Hope because they were filming, and the bowcaster was so heavy that he built up tons of muscle in his arms, but he was sweating all the time because this thing was so heavy, because it was made out of steel, like bona fide steel. It was before they knew how to cast certain items to make them lighter. And we had all these conversations, and as we had to leave, he was like, it was great meeting you guys, thank you for the fantastic conversation. And it kind of ended. Well, 2 weeks later, and this is my at an event coolest thing. 2 weeks later, I'm vending, and it said Planet Comic Con. And this kid who looks 17 or 18 years old walks by my booth, and it's the person that was repping Peter. And he stopped dead in his tracks, and he was like, "Oh my gosh, it's you." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, it's you." And he said, "Peter's here." And I'm like, "Yeah, I know." He goes, he talked about like the breakfast with you guys and how great you were all freaking day. I'm gonna tell him you're here. Okay. A couple hours later, there's this crowd of people that ends up like kind of flowing towards my booth. Peter is in the middle of it, and he stops at the booth, and he talked to me for half an hour.
Oh my
And
God.
it was like my favorite interaction that like a celebrity came up to my booth. We talked for a while, and he like I gave him, I do a Let the Wookiee Win cup. And I gave him the cup, and he loved it, and he was super nice and super gracious. And the look of the people that were standing around my booth when, like, when he left, he said, it was great seeing you again. Hopefully, hopefully we'll run across each other at some other shows. And he kind of, it was the typical, bye, see you later type thing. But the look of the people were like, who the hell are you? That Peter Mayhew just hung out with you for all that time, and now he's just saying bye, see you later. It was one of those like, oh, ha, ha, I got to puff up my chest a little bit and feel awesome. Look, I have pictures of John Barrowman with my puppy,
Oh, John
because John
Barrowman.
Barrowman
Yeah.
is a dog guy. But I think the Peter Mayhew like coming to my booth because he had a conversation with me is probably my favorite con nerd out moment.
I would have done the same thing. I walked past him and saw him signing autographs at San Diego one year, and I geeked out. So I can't even imagine if I was sitting at a table with talking to him. Oh my God.
Oh, I was losing my mind. When we were at breakfast, I was just like, "Bitch, Peter Mayhew!" And I couldn't express that. That would be like me being able to eat breakfast with Peter Cullen. You know,
Yeah.
I would probably cry in my eggs because it's my childhood.
Oh, I love that story. It makes me so happy.
When people are good,
That's my
when they're good, it's so great. It's just so
Mhm.
wonderful.
100%. Look, I've had some bad celebrity experiences, so the fact that most of them have been good is a big deal.
It's a shocker. Yeah. That seems like I really want to meet Tom Kenny because SpongeBob is like my life. But I think that if I was able to meet Mark Hamill, I'd probably have the same type of freak out inside of me. And I'd probably just go silent or be super rambly like I am in this interview. But I think that like those old school Star Wars people, I would freak out. I would freak out.
I got to pet Gary for 10 minutes while Carrie Fisher like finished up with her line in Edmonton that same year. And it was months before she passed. So that was like that'll always be special to me. Harrison is my like kind of my golden goose. If I can meet him, I'll die a happy person.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That would be amazing. He doesn't go to shows, does he? No.
No. No, he is not a show guy. The rumor is that he's been offered lots and lots of money and still is like, nah. And I can hear him saying it too. Like, I really can.
I could too.
All right. So what are all the other questions you want to ask me? Because I'll sit here and answer them all day.
Bill, do you have any other questions?
Let's see. Gosh. I gotta go with this one. If events were desserts, what kind would your favorite event be and why? What kind of a dessert would it be?
Oh man. German chocolate cake. I mean, it has to be German chocolate cake. German chocolate cake is the perfect the perfect thing. Or tres leches cake. It's gonna be cake. It's always gonna be cake. Cake is the perfect dessert.
I love German chocolate
I don't know how
cake.
to answer that. What's that?
I love German chocolate cake. It's so good.
It's so good. It's a tough question to answer because look, I can't even equate an event to my favorite dessert. I could actually. Fenix Salt Lake 2017 was my favorite dessert. Fantastic, like everything comes together, and I think German chocolate cake is the perfect example. You have perfect like the frosting with the little bit of coconut in there with just the richest freaking chocolate you can have, and that's the perfect event right there is when it all comes together.
Me. No, I want cake.
Such a lame answer.
No, it isn't.
It's not, and it was very specific on the one because it's not even you can't plan it. You can't like everything can come together, but there's something magical about the right event, the right moment, all happening at once. And you gave it. So there we go. Here's to another a new one to top 2017.
Oh, let's hope that happens this year because we talk about it a lot in the vendor world. Events are in retail as a whole in election years typically takes a dive. A 10 to 20% dip. So this year we're seeing that. We're seeing higher attendance at all the events, but less money in people's pockets to spend. And it happens every election cycle. People didn't see that in 2020 because one, we weren't at shows. Two, people had this extra income that a lot of people were receiving. So, we saw kind of a boom versus 2016 where spending didn't really start happening until September, October that year. And then everything really, took a sharp turn and went back to normal.
And that was a weird year too. I mean, I've talked to so many vendors and artists who that's when they started because all of a sudden people had to I compare it to an Etch-a-Sketch where it's like, all right, let's take the world and just go and everybody was like, cool, what do I do now? And so many people got out of events or came into events and it just switched.
And I'm gonna make a giant sidebar with this because you brought up a fantastic point that goes back to a couple of things that we talked about. ROI, good events, things like that. What we're seeing now is everybody that got into the making world and the vending world that got into it in 2020, 2021, they're starting to see a slowdown in sales. and they don't understand why. They weren't prepared for, the ebbs and flows that happens. All they've seen is this trajectory that just does this. And they're wondering what's going on. They can't figure it out. It's, one, there was a ton of disposable income out there. Two, purse strings are a little bit tighter. And three, and this is gonna sound awful, but not everybody is cut out for this life. It's not that, it's not that you have a terrible product. It's not that, you don't understand things, but it could be that you don't have the mindset or the skill set to be able to adapt.
Yeah.
That's a great point. And just to jump in really quick, it's also been interesting to see people go from like in person and online and going, oh, I did sell online, but it turns out I'm more an in-person sales. Or I wanted to do events and now it turns out I'm more online. And that's been fascinating to watch too, just as a sidebar.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I'll wrap it up with one last one because I want to know this. So if you could give advice to Ariel when you first started, what would the top 3 pieces of advice that you give yourself or that person?
Oh man. Give yourself 2 extra days every single time. I am chronically running behind, and it's because I put too much on myself. So I would definitely tell myself to give it 2 more days. You need that extra time. It's always like that. Every single show. Even now, I'm like, oh, if I had 2 more days, it would be this. Because again, I make everything, so I need that extra time. I think the other thing that I would tell myself, one of the other things is enjoy, like take time to enjoy the places you go. We
Good one.
as traveling leaders, um, we don't have, we people are like, oh, this is a great job. You get to travel and you get to see all these places. And I'm like, you know what I can tell you? I can tell you what the inside of the convention center looks like. I can tell you what the inside of my hotel looks like. And I can tell you what the inside of the Waffle House that's next to my hotel looks like. That's what I can tell you. I can also tell you what the interstate looks like. Um, it, you
Facts.
know, it's total facts because we travel so much. Build in time to enjoy what you're doing. After Phoenix a couple weeks ago, I took a couple of days and I went to California because outside of WonderCon, I haven't been to California in 5 years. I got to see my best friend. I got to see my godchild. I got to see all of these things that I hadn't been able to do in a long time, and it was nice to actually live a little bit of life. Um, and then the third thing, and this is a very personal thing for me, um, don't let this business swallow you up and take all of your time. Relationships are very hard when you're in this business,
Right.
both friend and personal. Um, don't let this business eat all of your time for those. Because just like your business needs your time to nurture it, those relationships, be it friendships or personal, they need that nurturing too. So don't unless you're a single person and you have no desire to have friends or a personal life whatsoever, a private life, then then you can do all the stuff, but definitely take a little bit of time for those personal relationships.
I love that. It's so relatable in so many ways. In so many ways.
And if you are super passionate about your job, all of that's true. Like whatever your work is, whether you're an event organizer, a vendor, an artist, on just about anything.
Yeah.
Great, great points.
All right. Well, Ariel, if anybody wants to find you, where do they find you on the socials?
Patent Pending Supply Co. on pretty much every social. I haven't done a Twitter yet. I probably should, but look, I feel like I'm yelling into a void on Twitter. So, Facebook is Facebook and Instagram are kind of the places. I still don't understand TikTok. I'm too old, I guess. I don't do dances, and I that's kind of what TikTok I feel like is. Maybe I could do dances with glassware. If you want to find me at shows, I'm at pretty much every large show. I also, like I said earlier, I'm the floor manager for Anime Town. So if you pop into an Anime Town event, you can find me there. I will have the soccer jersey that says Ariel, because that's Tim loves soccer, so we have soccer jerseys. Um, yeah, and like I said, socials, Patent Pending Supply Co. You can always ask me questions. I'm gonna plug it because we do a different kind of podcast. My friend Ryan and I do a review podcast of events. It's called Con Job, and you can get all of my rambling insight. You can hear me going off about AI and and a lot of other things on there. So I know you guys run a fantastic resource for your vendors and for the vendor community. Ours is more specific, and we just reviewed the shows that we've done.
Yeah. And it's an excellent podcast. Listen to it every week. So you can't go check
Yeah,
it out. Well, I thoroughly enjoyed talking to you. I do all the time, and I'm so thankful that you came on to talk to us today. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and so if you guys want to find us, we are at Eventany on Facebook, Eventany on LinkedIn, as well as TikTok is Eventany, and then on Instagram and Twitter, we are Eventany Team. And we'll also keep an eye out for the next podcast. We're going to discuss some more things about the vendor world and how we can help you and get resources out there. And besides that, Will, anything?
I think you got it all. I think that's it.
Perfect. All right. Well, thanks so much, everybody, and we'll see you next time.